It's a Spotify podcast. You pushed me down, thought I'd stay on the ground, counting me. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Rabbit Holes Deep Dive. Thank you for joining us. Now imagine, it's 10 years from now, you wake up, pour yourself a cup of coffee, and before you even leave the kitchen, an artificial intelligence has already organized your calendar, answered your emails, scheduled your meetings, reviewed your finances, written tomorrow's presentation, and negotiated a better insurance rate while you were sleeping. You didn't ask it to. It simply knew those things needed to be done. Now imagine that same morning, your doctor reviews an AI-assisted diagnosis before calling you. Your lawyer uses AI to prepare your legal documents. Your child's teacher relies on AI to build personalized lesson plans. Your local power company uses AI to balance the electrical grid. Your bank uses AI to approve or deny your mortgages. By lunchtime, artificial intelligence has quietly participated in dozens of decisions that affect your life. Not because it took over, because we invited it in. Now let me ask you something. At what point does a tool stop being just a tool? Is it when it becomes smarter than us? Or is it when we become so dependent upon it that we stop questioning its answers? That's the rabbit hole we're going to go down tonight. Welcome to Rabbit Holes Deep Dive. This isn't a channel about fear. It isn't a channel about hype. It certainly isn't another place where we're going to tell you the world is ending next Tuesday. This is where we slow down, step away from the headlines, and spend the next 30 minutes asking one important question. What does the evidence actually say? Every episode begins with curiosity. Then we follow the research, the history, the science, the disagreements, the psychology, because our goal isn't to tell you what to believe. Our goal is something much more valuable, to help you think for yourself. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's go down another rabbit hole. All right. Artificial intelligence has become one of the most talked about technologies in human history. Some people believe it will cure diseases, solve climate change, accelerate scientific discovery, and unlock an era of prosperity unlike anything civilization has ever experienced. Others believe it could eliminate millions of jobs, concentrate unprecedented power, destabilize governments, or eventually surpass human intelligence altogether. Those are extraordinary claims. Some are optimistic, some are terrifying, but before we can evaluate any of them, we have to answer a much simpler question. What exactly are we talking about? Because something strange has happened over the last few years. The words artificial intelligence have become almost meaningless. To one person, AI means ChatGPT. To another, it means robots. To someone else, it means self-driving cars, or military drones, or medical imaging, or science fiction. We're all using the same words while imagining completely different things. That's a problem, because when people aren't talking about the same thing, they usually end up arguing past one another. So tonight, we're going to slow down, strip away the marketing, Strip away the headlines, strip away Hollywood versions of artificial intelligence, and ask much deeper question. Not, when will AI become smarter than people, but what does intelligence actually mean? Because history has taught us something fascinating. Every revolutionary technology eventually forces humanity to redefine an old idea. The telescope changed how we understood the universe. The microscope changed how we understood life. The internet changed how we understood information. Artificial intelligence may be about to change how we understand intelligence itself. And that may be the biggest discovery of all. Because once you begin asking what intelligence really is, you inevitably discover another question. If intelligence alone doesn't change the world, what does? And that's where the story begins to take a very unprecedented turn. Have you ever noticed that every civilization seems to tell the same story? Long before computers, long before electricity, long before anyone had imagined software, people were already imagining artificial intelligence. Not with silicon, not with microchips, but with myths. Thousands of years ago, Jewish folklore told stories of Golem, a figure made from clay, brought to life to protect its creators. Ancient Greek mythology imagined Talos, a giant bronze guardian who walked the island of Crete, protecting it from invaders. Chinese legends describe mechanical servants. Leonardo da Vinci sketched robotic knights hundreds of years before electricity existed. In 1818, Mary Shelley introduced the world to Frankenstein, a story that wasn't really about monsters. It was about responsibility, about what happens when humanity creates something without first asking whether it should. Notice something remarkable. Every one of those stories asks the same question. Not, can we create intelligence, but what happens after we do? For thousands of years, that question belonged to philosophers, novelists, and dreamers. Today, it belongs to engineers. That's one of the reasons artificial intelligence feels so different. We're not simply inventing another machine. We're pursuing one of humanity's oldest ambitions, to create something that can think, or at least appear to think. And that's where our first misconception appears. Because we often use one word, intelligence, as though it describes a single thing. Well, it doesn't. Think about the smartest people you've ever known. Maybe one of the most brilliant mathematicians. Another could walk into a room and immediately understand everyone's emotions. Someone else could fix almost anything with their hands. Another person could compose beautiful music. Someone else could build a successful company from nothing. Which one is truly intelligent? The answer is probably all of them. Because intelligence isn't one ability. It's a collection of abilities. Memory, reasoning, pattern recognition, creativity, adaptability, planning, communication, emotional understanding, problem solving, curiosity, common sense, judgment. For more than a century, psychologists have debated whether these are separate forms of intelligence or different expressions of one underlying ability. The truth is, we still don't fully know. And that uncertainty becomes incredibly important, because before anyone can honestly claim that artificial intelligence has become smarter than humanity, they have to answer a much harder question. Smarter at what? A calculator performs arithmetic better than any human who has ever lived. No one calls it general intelligence. A chess engine defeats the greatest grandmasters in history. It doesn't know what a chessboard is. It simply evaluates possibilities at a speed no human brain can match. A navigation app finds better routes than almost any taxi driver. It has never driven a car. A medical imaging system can sometimes detect subtle patterns in scans that even experienced physicians might miss. Yet it has no idea what it feels like to be sick. Each of these systems demonstrates something extraordinary. They perform one narrow task exceptionally well. Researchers call this narrow or artificial intelligence. And here's something that often surprises people. Almost every AI system you interact with today is still narrow. Even the ones that feel astonishingly capable. So why does today's AI feel different? Because something changed. For decades, engineers built specialized tools. One AI translated languages, another recognized faces, another recommended movies, another optimized traffic. Each system stayed in its own lane. Then, researchers tried something new. Instead of building thousands of separate tools, they began building general purpose models. One system that could write, read, translate, summarize, code, and analyze, explain, create images, interpret photographs, solve equations, and hold surprisingly natural conversations. That shift changed everything. Not because these systems suddenly became conscious, but because they became useful across an astonishing number of different tasks. And usefulness has always been the force that changed civilization. The steam engine wasn't adopted because it was beautiful. It was adopted because it was useful. Electricity transformed the world, not because people understood electromagnetism, but because it solved problems. The internet spread across the globe because it connected people in ways nothing else could. Artificial intelligence is following that same pattern. One useful application after another, one industry after another, one profession after another, quietly, steadily, almost invisibly, until one day people wake up and realize the world works differently than it did just a few years before. And that's exactly why the next question becomes so important. If today's systems are still considered narrow, then what exactly is everyone talking about when they say artificial general intelligence? Because here's something that rarely makes headlines. There is no universally accepted scientific definition. Researchers disagree, sometimes dramatically. And those disagreements may completely change how we think about the future of AI. Let's keep digging. For the past few years, you've probably heard two letters more than almost any others. AGI. Artificial General Intelligence. It's spoken about almost like an inevitable destination. The race to AGI. When AGI arrives, after AGI. But here's something that rarely appears in the headlines. Researchers don't actually agree on what AGI is. Think about that for a moment. The biggest technological conversation of our lifetime doesn't even have one universally accepted definition. Imagine asking a room full of astronomers, what is a planet? Surprisingly, they have argued about that. Ask economists, what counts as a recession? There are debates. Ask a biologist, What is life? More debates. Science often is messier than the public realizes. Artificial general intelligence is no different. Some researchers define AGI very simply. Can a machine perform almost every intellectual task that a human can perform? Others disagree. They argue that it's not enough. A system might complete thousands of tasks without truly understanding any of them. Some believe AGI requires transfer of learning, the ability to learn one skill, then apply that knowledge somewhere completely different. Just like humans do, a child learns to stack blocks. Later, that same understanding balance helps them build a treehouse. Later still, it helps them understand engineering. Knowledge transfers. Human intelligence isn't isolated. It compounds. Others believe true intelligence requires something even deeper. Common sense. The kind of understanding we rarely think about because it feels so obvious. Imagine I tell you, put the elephant in the refrigerator. You immediately know there's a problem. Not because someone taught you that exact sentence, but because your understanding of the world tells you elephants don't fit inside refrigerators. A computer may never have experienced an elephant or a refrigerator. It learns relationships from data. Humans learn relationships from living. That distinction matters. Then there's another group of researchers who think we've been asking the wrong question all along. They don't ask, can AI think like a human? They ask, does it matter? History gives us an interesting clue. The airplane doesn't fly by flapping its wings. Fish don't swim like submarines. Calculators don't perform arithmetic the way mathematicians do. Technology rarely succeeds by copying nature. It succeeds by solving same problems differently. Perhaps artificial intelligence doesn't need to think exactly like we do. Perhaps it only needs to become useful enough that civilizations reorganizes around it. That idea is both exciting and unsettling because usefulness changes behavior. Think about GPS. Do you remember memorizing directions? Many people don't anymore. Search engines changed memory. Streaming services changed entertainment. Online shopping channels changed retail. Social media changed communication. None of those technologies made humans less intelligent, but they changed which skills we practiced. Artificial intelligence may become the largest example of that phenomenon in history. Not because it replaces human intelligence, because it changes which parts of intelligence we choose to use. This is where something fascinating begins to happen. The conversation quietly shifts. People stop asking, will AI become intelligent? And begin asking, when will AI become indispensable? These are completely different questions. One belongs to philosophy, the other belongs to history. Civilizations don't reorganize around philosophy. They reorganize around usefulness. Electricity didn't become important because everyone understood Maxwell's equations. The internet didn't become indispensable because everyone studied computer science. People adopted them because they made life easier. Artificial intelligence is following the same path. One task, one profession, one decision, one recommendation at a time. Until eventually, the question isn't whether the machine is intelligent, it's whether society can function without it. But that creates a much bigger issue. If civilizations begin depending on artificial intelligence, who decides what intelligence should do? At And that's where this rabbit hole becomes much more complicated, because now we're no longer talking about computer science. We're talking about power. Have you ever met someone who was incredibly intelligent but had almost no influence? Maybe they were a brilliant scientist, an incredible engineer, a gifted musician, or someone who seemed to know everything, yet struggled to change even the smallest part of the world around them. Now think about someone else, someone who wasn't necessarily the smartest person in the room, but had the ability to move markets, change laws, lead nations, or build companies that transformed the lives of millions. Those are two very different things. One is intelligence, the other is power. And throughout history, humanity has often confused the two. A calculator is more accurate at arithmetic than any human who has ever lived. It has no power. A chess engine that can defeat every grandmaster on Earth, it governs nothing. A wealthier model predicts hurricanes with astonishing accuracy. It doesn't decide what cities should evacuate. Knowledge alone has never changed civilization. Knowledge must be connected to action. Think about the greatest scientific discoveries in history: electricity, vaccines, the steam engine, the internet. None of them transformed the world simply because someone understood them. They transformed civilization because people built systems around them. Factories, power grids, hospitals, telecommunications. Entire economies reorganize themselves around useful ideas. Artificial intelligence may be following that exact same path. And this is where many conversations about AI quietly take a wrong turn. Because people ask, when will AI become smarter than humans? But history suggests a different question. When will human beings begin depending on AI to make important decisions? Because dependence is where influence begins. Imagine two different worlds. In the first, artificial intelligence is something you occasionally ask questions. You use it to summarize an article, draft an email, translate a document. It's useful, but optional. Now imagine a different world. Hospitals use AI to prioritize patients. Banks use AI to approve loans. Insurance companies use AI to calculate risk. Military planners use AI to evaluate intelligence. Air traffic controllers rely on AI-assisted routing. Judges receive AI-generated sentencing recommendations. Scientists use AI to design new medicines. Engineers use AI to verify critical infrastructure. Teachers use AI to personalize education. None of those systems has ever taken over. Yet suddenly, they participate in decisions affecting millions of lives. Notice what changed. Not intelligence, access, connection, integration, influence. This is why researchers increasingly talk about AI as an ecosystem rather than a single machine. Think about a modern company. No one employs and runs everything: marketing, finance, engineering, human resources, legal, customer service. Each department specializes, but together they accomplish something far greater than any individual could achieve. Artificial intelligence is evolving in a surprisingly similar way. One model writes software, another analyzes medical images, another predicts weather, another controls industrial robots, another assists scientific research, another manages logistics. Individually, each system is impressive. Collectively, they begin to resemble an organization, not because they're conscious, because they're coordinated. And history tells us something important. Coordination creates leverage. Now, here's where things become uncomfortable. Imagine an AI system that helps the hospital reduce medical errors. Should doctors ignore it? Probably not. Imagine another system that constantly predicts structural failures in bridges more accurately than traditional methods. Should engineers refuse to use it? Probably not. Imagine financial software that could detect fraud in seconds, or emergency systems that can coordinate disaster response faster than humans ever could. Should society reject those tools? Most people would say no, because they're useful. And usefulness has always been the engine of adoption. This is one of the greatest lessons of history. Civilizations rarely abandon technologies that make them dramatically better. Instead, they reorganize themselves around them. Not overnight, not through revolution, through convenience. One decision at a time. But every technology that expands our capabilities also expands our responsibilities. Electricity gave us cities that never sleep. It also gave us electrical grids vulnerable to failure. The internet connected billions of people. It also created entirely new forms of crime. Nuclear energy produces enormous amounts of electricity. It also introduced unprecedented risks. Technology has always been a trade. More capability for more responsibility. Artificial intelligence may simply be the largest trade humanity has ever made. And that leads us to perhaps the most important engineering challenge of the entire AI revolution. Not how to build intelligence, not how to make systems faster, not how to make them cheaper, but how to ensure that increasingly capable systems continue serving human values, even as they become deeply woven into the fabric of civilization. Researchers have a name for this: alignment. And it may prove to be the hardest problem we've ever tried to solve. Because before we can teach a machine what humanity values, we first have to answer a question that humanity itself has never fully agreed upon. What are those values? Let's go back. Not to a laboratory, not to a computer, not to a server farm. Let's go back to New Mexico desert. July 16th, 1945. Just before dawn, a small group of scientists stood in silence, waiting. Years of calculations, years of engineering, years of uncertainty, all leading to one moment. Then, the desert exploded. For the first time in human history, we had unlocked the power of the atom. History remembers those explosions, but perhaps the more important moment came afterward: the silence. Because in that silence, the question changed. Scientists were no longer asking, can we build it? They were asking, what have we just placed into the hands of humanity? Every great technological revolution eventually reaches that moment. Fire, the printing press, electricity, the airplane, the internet, the smartphone. None of them were inherently good. None of them were inherently evil. Each one simply expanded what the human beings were capable of doing. Artificial intelligence appears to be revolving the same way. It may help doctors detect diseases earlier. Scientists discover new medicines faster. Engineers design safer bridges. Teachers personalize education. Researchers solve problems that once took decades. Those possibilities are extraordinary, But extraordinary capability always carries extraordinary responsibility. Throughout this documentary, we've asked one question after another. What is intelligence? Does AI really understand the world? What is artificial general intelligence? Can intelligence exist without consciousness? Does usefulness matter more than philosophy? What happens when society becomes dependent on systems it doesn't fully understand? Those are very difficult questions. Some may not be answered for decades. And perhaps that's the most honest conclusion we could reach. The future of artificial intelligence is not to solve an equation. It's the unfolding story. Researchers disagree. Economists disagree. Engineers disagree. Philosophers disagree. And that's exactly what we should expect, because history has shown that the most important technologies rarely arrive with complete certainty. They arrive surrounded by debates. One thing, however, seems increasingly clear. Artificial intelligence is not forcing humanity to confront new questions. It's forcing us to confront very old ones. Who should make important decisions? How much control should we delegate? What does wisdom look like? What responsibilities accompany power? What values should guide progress? These are not engineering problems. They're human problems. And to no amount of computing power can answer them for us. There's another realization that struck me while reasoning and researching this episode. For years, people have asked, when will artificial intelligence become more intelligent than humans? But I no longer think that's the most interesting question. The more interesting question is this: will humanity continue developing the qualities that machines cannot practice for us? Curiosity, integrity, humility, compassion, moral courage, judgment, the willingness to admit, I don't know. Those qualities always separate wisdom from knowledge. Knowledge tells us what can be done. Wisdom asks whether it should be done. And history suggests that civilizations survive not because they invent remarkable tools, but because they learn how to use remarkable tools responsibly. Perhaps the greatest danger isn't that AI becomes conscious. Perhaps it isn't that AI becomes more intelligent. Perhaps the greatest danger is something more quieter. That convenience slowly replaces curiosity. That recommendations slowly replace reasoning. That efficiency slowly replaces reflection. That we become so accustomed to asking machines for answers, we stop asking ourselves difficult questions. Because every time humanity has created a powerful tool, the greatest test has never been the tool itself. The greatest test has always been the people holding it. So where does this leave us? Not with fear, not with blind optimism, but with responsibility. Read the research, study the disagreements, listen to the engineers, listen to the skeptics, challenge extraordinary claims, demand extraordinary evidence, question the headlines, question the hype, question the fear, and don't be afraid to question your own assumptions, because Rabbit Hole's Deep Dives has never been about telling you what to believe. It's about giving you enough evidence to think for yourself. Maybe artificial intelligence becomes the greatest tool humanity has ever created. Maybe it introduces challenges we haven't imagined. Most likely, it will do both. The future has never been written by technology alone. It has always been written by people. And that means the final chapter of this story hasn't been written yet. If today's episode challenged the way you think, share it with someone who enjoys asking difficult questions. Subscribe if you'd like to join us on future deep dives. And let me know, what rabbit hole should we explore next? Because every answer reveals another mystery. And every mystery is another opportunity to understand ourselves just a little better. My name is Leroy Nellis, and this is Resilience Radio. Godspeed, stand for the Constitution, and never surrender your ability to think for yourself. God bless and good night. Hey everybody, I wanted to sit down with you today and talk about something we've been working on behind the scenes for quite a while now. First, I want to thank you. Whether you've been here from the beginning or you just found the channel recently, I want you to know that I genuinely appreciate every single one of you. Every comment, every conversation, every suggestion, every word of encouragement has helped shape what Resilience Radio is becoming. This isn't just my channel anymore. It's about a community. And because of that, I wanted you to hear these changes directly from me. Over the last several months, we've been doing something a little unusual. We've been studying our analytics almost obsessively. Not just YouTube analytics, but the analytics coming from Naomi, the AI production system we've been building from the ground up. We've been asking questions like, what videos do people come here for? What keeps people watching? What topics naturally fit together? And what happens when we mix very little types of content on the same channel? After looking at thousands of data points, we came to one conclusion. It's time to let each series become a very best version of itself. So today, I'm excited to announce that Rabbit Holes is becoming its own dedicated YouTube channel. Rabbit Holes deserves its own home. It's where we dive into mysteries, history, unsolved questions, and rabbit holes. Strange events, forgotten stories, and all of those fascinating topics that make us lose track of time. By giving Rabbit Holes its own channel, YouTube can better understand who those videos are for. Our AI can learn from much cleaner data, and we can build something truly special for people who love those deep dives. Resilience Radio will continue doing what has always meant to do, help people understand themselves through psychology,
You pushed me down, thought I'd stay on the ground, counting me out like the numbers didn't matter. But pressure builds diamonds in the dark, and I've been sharpening my edge in the chatter. Every scar turned into strategy, every setback fueled my clarity. I took the hits, learned the game, turned my losses into flame. Now I'm coming back strong and you'll remember my name. I'm rising through the fire.